So these laws were passed as an ordinance during the first lockdown of COVID. And people think they're laws of 2020. But these are laws of 1991. Now 1991 is the year the World Bank, IMF put structural adjustment on India. India had got into a $90 billion debt, and most of the debt was for loans they'd given us, which is the typical debt story. You know, personal life, same issue, national life, same issue. The agriculture, green revolution debts were 1/3 of it. I did a calculation, how many dams, how much fertilizer, you know, how much was that? That was 1/3 of the 90 billion, 30 billion debt was for ruining our agriculture. So when, you know, the way structural, how many of you know about structural adjustment? Well, structural adjustment is when IMF and World Bank, using a debt crisis, get a government to totally reorganize its system. And this is when they force privatization, you know, and say, no, this can't be a public good, it has to be private. And they force changes in laws. So in 91, they made a whole list, and I have all this written in many of my books. And I think we did a report last year because I was appointed to the Women's Commission report on women in agriculture, and we actually prepared a draft policy, and I've written in that report on Women Feed the World on all these structural adjustments, and another report we have on globalization. So I mentioned the Bengal famine and Tebhaga. Out of that came the Essential Commodities Act. Because why were people starving? Not because there wasn't enough grain, because there was speculation, there was trade, there was hoarding. You know, we had an MP called Geeta Mukherjee, Bengal, and she'd been in the Tebhaga movement. And she was part of framing the Essential Commodities Act, that you cannot hoard and you cannot speculate. And this act was vital that India didn't starve of famine after that. The second thing the World Bank wanted was changing what is called the Agricultural Produce Marketing Cooperative Act. Now these cooperatives are where the farmers and the small traders come together, because of essential commodities, no trade can have more than a certain amount, very tiny amount. So if you go to these mandis, you will see each trader has a small amount of grain. They can't trade in more than that. And the farmers and the traders sit together to fix the price. So neither of them is losing. So the APMC Act was the next act. The third was a contract law for farming. Each of these used to be brought to Parliament from 91 onwards. And each time in parliamentary debate, it would be defeated. So in 2020, there was no parliament. Therefore, it came as an ordinance. So when you ask, you know, first is, I've never recognized these as laws of 2020. These are 1991 leftovers. And while the farmers would be marching, you know, I was locked down here. And it was interesting because everyone who was marching was a son of someone I had worked with in the 90s. You know, Mahendra Singh Tiket was the big leader. Rakesh Tiket is the leader today. All of the farmers of Punjab are the sons and grandsons, the farmers of the night. So this is really a 30-year struggle. Why is Essential Commodities Act vital? It's the only way to stop speculation. The current price rise is not because of the Ukraine war. The current price rise is because the financial system has got into the food system. 87% of the purchases this year were the financial giants. And they're speculating on it. So everywhere we should be having an Essential Commodities Act. That what's essential to life, just like what's essential to life from nature should be a commons, what's essential to life in the economy should be kept as essential, and therefore there's an obligation of regulation. Regulation is necessary for maintaining any living system. Our bodies have regulation. Every cell has regulation. Every plant has regulation. Anything deregulated is a system of deregulation is sickness. A sickness either of economic inequality, of sickness in terms of biological sickness and plants getting sick and animals getting, silly lumpy disease these days in India in animals. COVID, we've seen what it did to us. So that's the Essential Commodities Act, the APMC Act. What we've said and what the farmers were saying is not only do we need to defend these existing APMC, we need far more markets. Because these were not governed by the government. They're governed by farmer trader associations. And I really say there should be farmers markets everywhere. Look at America, if it didn't have farmers markets, where could you get decent food? The only way a good farmer wanting to do organic production can come and sell is through a farmer's. So we need many more markets, because to me the monopoly of Amazon, Walmart, Cargill is so wrong. And then the third, the contract farming law. I'm so glad it never passed, because the contract farming law was basically a contract between corporations, agribusiness corporations who've driven American farmers off the land. And will they be kind to the Indian farmers? No. But worse, this contract farming law would be outside the legal system. If a company had cheated you, and they constantly cheat you, you could not go to the courts to get justice. You would go to the district magistrate, who you can't even meet. I know that even at my level, to go and meet a district magistrate, the British made them as collectors of the tax, of the lagan. But today they have everything under their hand. They're running the cities, they're running smart cities, they'd have been running contract farming laws, they'd be controlling agriculture. So it was just so wrong. For a country of small farmers, 60% of India is still living on the land. The cities seem to get big. But I don't know how many of you watched when the COVID lockdown was announced in India. Millions of people who started marching back to their villages. That's where you test, is life in the village or in a slum in Delhi? And how many people still have their roots in villages? So I'm quite glad. I've worked since '91 to not allow these laws to come into being. So I'm quite happy that the Prime Minister was forced to withdraw them. It's the first time he's withdrawn anything. Jab main bachchi thi, I have seen how, my mother she became a refugee. She was an inspectress of school. She's got stuck on the other side of the border when the line was drawn by the Britishers to divide India and Pakistan. And she was rescued only because my father was in the military. It so happened that the cook, who was a Muslim man, said nobody wanted to go because everyone was being massacred. And he said, I'll go. And they caught him at Amritsar station. And he said, he's a Muslim, kill him, kill him. And he started to shout my father's name. And when my father's name was shouted, the British officer on duty, he said, call that man, what is he saying? He says, I'm Major Shiva's cook, and I've come to rescue Mrs. Shiva, and she's stuck on the other side. And because he had worked under my dad in the war in Burma, my mother got saved. Otherwise, we'd never have, I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be born. But then she said, I've done everything, I've broken every glass ceiling, I've done everything women didn't do, and now I want to be a farmer. And she became a farmer. My father was a senior conservator forest. My mother used to earn more from farming than him. So we've seen that period too. We've seen the period where farming was, because we'd had famines, because we'd had all of the scarcity created by the war and the British Empire, there was huge respect given for agriculture. Then you had the Green Revolution, which didn't focus on agriculture as much as inputs for the Green Revolution. The policy became inputs. Then you have globalization, the $90 billion debt and everything I was talking about, 91 and then 95, the WTO. And the WTO Agriculture Agreement has only 3 clauses: export competition, domestic support, and market access. So basically, what it starts to do is twist the arms of government. You know, I remember 98. In 98, suddenly GMO soya was flooding our market, zero tariffs, the tariffs were reduced to zero. And our mustard disappeared. All our ghanis were shut down. And the women from the slums, because I've been building this food movement for so long, women from the slums called me, said, bring our mustard back. So I said, let me study what happened. And then I studied, and did a book called Mustard versus Soya. And we did the satyagraha. We made mustard oil. The flooding of the palm oil and soya oil hasn't stopped, but the illegality of mustard from a kachi ghani, that stopped. Every company now says kachi ghani ka sarson ka tel. Every one of them, So the measure always is, for me, the measure is how do you keep possibilities open for a future during closure? It's not in our hands to be able to have the countering political power of the big economic interests. Even though, we organize as the International Forum on Globalization, have a whole chapter on that. When the GATT came up, we were building movements. I organized 500,000 farmers rally in Bangalore to say farming is too precious to be left to free trade. And food is not a commodity. It's too precious for health. And then those of us who were concerned got together, we formed the International Forum on Globalization. And there's just a handful of us organized Seattle in 1999 and stopped the WTO. After that, they started to weaponize, literally. Then the Genoa protests happened, they killed that young boy. And after that, the military was in bigger numbers than any of the protesters anyway. So what we are really seeing is a militarization to deliver non-sustainability agendas and unjust agendas, and it'll work for a while. But when you say chota sa reh gaya, ek diya bhi to chota sa hota hai. और darkness तो इतनी भयंकर होती है, पर एक दिया बचा रहे दूसरे दिए को जला देगा. If you take, as a scientist, I project. I'm used to drawing graphs. If something is happening this way and it keeps going that way, it's going to be an explosive collapse. And that is what everyone knows and recognizes, and everyone is seeing. So if we keep going on that path, that's the only way. So when I started to save seeds, I knew the Monsantos are big. I knew they have the power to change government policies and even laws. Thank goodness our laws we could change in the right way. But I used to always say, कुछ बीज बच जाए, तो बहुत है. And I read a Palestinian poem, very powerful poem. Someone sent it to me because of the seed work I was doing. And they said, you can destroy my villages, you can burn my books, you can kill every tree till there's no bird, no insect can find a place to hide. I do not fear you, because I have one seed that I will plant and grow again. So to me, these little pockets of practice, of thinking for a possible future are the seeds of the future.